Hello, sir. Are you there?
Yeah.
We're waiting for the remaining.
Yeah. Shall we wait for like 2 more minutes?
I'm sure, sir.
Yeah.
The number seems to be low since the weeks are ending.
Since the what?
Since the week, it's,
Oh. Oh. Oh, I thought it was because of the course was ending. When do you have your exams?
I think it's April 29th or 28th. We got a message saying it might be 28th.
All right. Did you get to know your locations for exam?
I don't think I've got my hall ticket yet, sir. It'll come by email, right?
I think so, yeah. Where are you from, Govind?
I'm currently in Tamil Nadu, Trichy, sir.
Okay.
Is it possible to find an exam center here?
I have no idea. I never dealt with that. It's the NPTEL people who are doing that.
Where are you staying at, sir?
Tirupati. Tirupati, IISER Tirupati.
Not too far away,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
sir?
it's not very far. Have you ever participated in any of the bird atlas or something of that sort?
You mean any of the bird counting sessions?
Yeah, yeah.
I've not had the time yet. I've participated in this course last year, but that's it.
Okay. So what do you do?
I'm a college student.
Okay. Okay.
So, that's why I haven't participated yet, sir. Not quite used to.
Sure. All right. Um, I'll start. Think so. Yeah. So people who are new to this, I'm Jobin Varughese. I'm a PhD student at IISER Tirupati, and I work with Dr. V.V. Robin. And so, for my obligation towards the PMR of fellowship that I get, we have to conduct like 2 weeks of classes every, sorry, 1 week of class every week. So, and yeah, so NPTEL gave us this platform, and that's what we're doing over here. So yeah, so they suggested we do this question answer format, and yeah, most of my classes are like that. Yeah. So people who are new to this session, they can read the question on the screen and give me an answer in the chat box if possible. So you can read the question and probably post the answer in the chat box. People who have just recently joined, and this is for you.
Sir, biotic homogenization refers to a process when two species which are separated are similar, right, sir?
No. Uh, oh, that is not explained. Okay, so biotic homogenization is basically uh, when certain disturbances happen. What happens is there are new species that get joined, that get added to the community, and there are some species that get removed from the community. So biotic homogenization is basically certain traits of these species start looking. Certain traits get similar in some sense. So homogenization of these traits happen. So that is what's happening in a lot of species due to climate change and habitat change. And yeah, so
These when two
so basically
species that are
species
separate, when
species
two
of
species are
similar sorry species of similar traits accumulate or they increase in number in the within the community, and species that actually uh, are the reason for the trait variations get removed. So basically your community starts looking very similar, uh, probably because yeah.
this is within one community, right, sir?
Yeah.
By generation time, you mean their lifespan?
Yeah. People who've joined recently, can they also give some answer? So basically, I'll explain again. Biotic homogenization is basically um, similarity in the traits of bird species of bird community that happens because of either climate change or landscape change or other or other changes. So basically, when you see like for example, urbanization is one such change, and you can see most of the urban birds have very similar traits. Uh, one has to think a little bit to understand that they actually have a lot of similar traits. Yes, go ahead.
Is this related to the? Is this because of this the stress gradient hypothesis from week 10? Like due to the environmental filtering caused by anthropogenic factors, the species tends to look a lot similar, have similar traits. That is.
Possibly, yeah. Tarun, Harini, Rajashri, do you want to guess some answer? Any answer would do. You don't have to be sorry about it. It's okay. I'm not marking anything or something.
I haven't watched the lecture yet, so I'm guessing this from my ability, sir.
Yeah, but this is from the lecture. This question at least. All right. So I'll give you the answer. It's B, generation time. So what you find is in the tropical mountain forests, at least in Andes, where the study was done by Gomez et al. 2021, and they realized that a lot of uh, a lot of the birds that are found after a certain period of time, like from so the species richness or species were basically counted in some past years, a few years back, actually a few decades back, and they were counted again in this decade, and they found that there's a huge difference between the functional traits of these communities, and they found that species that are they have similar body size. Habitat breadth is basically number of habitats that these species actually use. So more generalist the species, more the habitats they use. More specialist the species, less habitat they use. They only have like limited. So basically, Sholakili would only be found in Shola forest, so they cannot use other habitats. So once the Shola forest is gone, uh, they'll disappear. So habitat breadth of the Sholakili is less, but whereas habitat breadth of something like a red-whiskered bulbul might be very large. They can be found in open area. They can be found in somewhat forested areas. And dispersal ability, like higher dispersal ability, birds with higher dispersal ability would can disperse more to newer areas, and less dispersal ability, like smaller birds with roundish wings have lesser dispersal ability. So what they found is af- after I mean due to climate change possibly, uh, what they found is birds started having similar body size. They started being more generalist, and they started having a larger dispersal ability. And one more question for you guys: which towards which body size would the birds be moving?
Smaller size, sir. If they have greater dispersal ability, then it means they're smaller. They
Not
would
not necessary, no.
comparatively smaller.
Okay. Yeah, so smaller body sizes. So basically, this was there in Umesh's lecture. What they what they say is the larger species, the larger body sized species started disappearing more, and most of the newer species on the existing species started having very similar body sizes. So that is what biotic homogenization is. And yeah, I mean, it's also found in like Govind said, the stress hypothesis that also talks about this kind of a homogenization where similar body-sized species are found after a stress or something. So, yeah.
Sir, is there any example of a large-bodied bird that went missing in that area?
In that area, I'm not sure.
In the Andes, that is.
Yeah, I mean, probably you'll have to read the paper. I'm not very good with birds outside India. Can look it up. Yeah. Rajashri, Tarun, Manmat, do you want to try and answer? So, Priyanka Hariharan, she did the study in Valparai, and Yeah, so the Valparai NGO was looking at. So they were actually they had this vast nurseries that they had set up for the indigenous species, the forest species, picking up seeds from the roadways, the roads and pathways, and it takes a long time for the shola species, other species in those areas to actually grow. All the native species take a really long time to grow, even up to seedling stages. So it takes like 2 years for them to reach the sapling stage, where they can be transplanted to the newer areas. So they've been actively restoring for the past 20 years these forests, and yes, so and this is and she did her study comparing actively restored sites with both naturally regenerating sites and a benchmark site, which is like the pure native forest that is found over there. And what she found was the rainfall. So, okay, question for you. When we talk about all the species, all the bird species, what did she find out of the four options? What do you think happened with the number of all species or the species richness, basically?
Could you repeat it, sir?
So, this question is about the rainforest species. But when we are talking about all the species, the rainforest and the open area species, what was the result? Uh, did their number increase? Did their number decrease? Or did their numbers remain the same? Like A, B, C.
The number of open area species and must have decreased, sir.
I'm talking about all the species.
The total number of species.
Yeah.
Total number of species would have increased, sir.
Okay. Everyone apart from Govind.
Don't exactly remember. I do remember that rainforest species increase the most in
Okay.
actively regenerated areas.
Yeah.
As far as I remember, I agree with Govind that open area species, I think, decreased or they favored the areas that were not
Okay.
regenerated.
Yeah. But I'm talking about all the species, Rusbe. Open plus rainforest together. Did that
I,
increase? Did that decrease?
I think it
Sir,
overall increased, yes.
Sorry?
yes, an overall.
All increase. Overall species did increase.
Okay.
Open area as well as the rainforest.
Okay. So yeah, you guys were right about the first two sentences that you said, that the rainforest species increased and the open area species, the country species, the open country species, they decreased in number. But when we are comparing all the species together, they remain same. There was no significant difference between the number of species in actively restored and naturally regenerating species sites and the benchmark. And yeah, that's something very important even while you're studying. So we might assume that they will increase, but usually a lot of open area species are also included in the number. So yeah, so basically the negative and the positive effects balance out sometimes, and when you're looking at a total number, it remains very similar, but you'll have to divide these yeah, the traits and stuff like that to know where the effects are seen. So yeah, so that's why species richness is not a good index for calculating the changes, the landscape change or climate change, because they don't usually tell much. Because, but like we said, right, the species richness, it's better if we do functional richness or functional diversity or something of that sort. So, anyways,
Sir,
yeah,
where was this again? The place of the study, the
Valparai. Valpara in Tamil Nadu.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Sorry, that Bugun Leo Chichla, the L should not be capitalized. Sorry about that. So Bugun Leo Chichla has a history where it's found only in the Eagle Nest wildlife sanctuary, and yeah, even the problem is even the localites didn't know about this bird, and it's got a very unique call and everything, so it cannot be like missed. But even the localites were not aware of this bird, and it was only Ramana Atreya who discovered this bird again, who actually discovered this bird. And the first year he could just take photographs, and through those photographs he actually managed to convince the world that there's a new species. But probably the second year he went back again, collected samples, the feathers and stuff like that, to do a genetic analysis, and finally this bird was added as a new species in Indian subcontinent after a really long time. So yeah. Okay, most people say it's B.
When was this bird last seen, sir?
No, no. Now it's seen very regularly. There are people who know exactly where it is seen, and they go over there, click photographs. Now there are like plenty of photographs everywhere. It's just that the distribution of this bird is like highly restricted. It's 2 square kilometer, not even 20. So it's that limited. So yeah. So apparently they don't occur in flatter areas. They need like a very high slope of very high slopy forest to survive, and that's why probably it was not this. Yeah, only seen in Arunachal, and that's why probably nobody noticed these birds for a really long time.
Sir, is it still confined to just 2 square kilometers?
Yeah.
So even after being known, it's not discovered anywhere else.
No. So I have a colleague who works. I don't have a. I mean, he worked with me for a long time back. So he also works. He works with Umesh these days. So he has been there. He has seen the bird, and he says it's like one particular location. If you know where it is, you'll see the bird where it is easily found. But if you don't know the location, you'll not be able to find the bird, even if you like go length and breadth of Arunachal Pradesh forests. Yeah, 1.7 kilometer initially. Yeah, like I said, it's just under 2 square kilometer. Yeah. Thank you, Tarun.
Sir, is it possible that this bird might be found in other areas, but it's not seen?
Uh, Very possible, but given that there are a lot of scientific research going on in those areas, um, and with the localites as well, and localites usually have like yeah, they have these informations because they have lived with that forest for a long time. So the Bugun Leochichla's conservation is actually being headed by a local organization. So possibly it's still 2 square kilometer, but yeah, you never know. Yeah, I mean, Bruce Bay, it's unbelievable that it's only 2 square kilometers. That's basically how much? Like 1.5 into 1.5, like yeah, 1.4 into 1.4, yeah. So Vedang says that won't that mean that area be under high pressure from human encroachment, especially photographers? I think Arunachal Pradesh is pretty proactive. Like Arunachal Pradesh and Kerala are two states which are very proactive when it comes to forest conservation, and they go with the latest scientific proposals and suggestions. So they take scientific suggestions very seriously. So I suppose Arunachal Pradesh must have some kind of a barrier or some kind of a check on the number of photographers that are allowed in that area, how many researchers are allowed in that area, and etc. etc. So probably, yeah. And now that it's Manmat says that now it's protected, any chance that it could be increased to seen in more areas. So that I mean, I don't know how good that idea is, because like Umesh says that these birds are only found in like particular slopy areas and not in flat areas, and why this area nobody knows, nobody has tried to understand that. And also there are like only very few birds in that particular 2 square kilometer. So even the research on these birds to find out like why that particular area is also not possible, or at least it's not allowed by the government. So we'll never know, I mean. Yeah.
In fact, Umesh has painted a pretty, grim picture, because he says that since they're only found in those ravines,
Yeah.
and they are kind of moving up
Huh.
to cope with climate change. After a point, there's nowhere they can move.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's.
Sir, is it possible that this species is some kind of old relict or ancient species that's almost on the verge of extinction?
So you think relic species are almost on the verge of extinction?
No, sorry, I might not have used the term properly, but is it possible that this species is it's a rather old one that's on its last legs?
I'm not
I
sure
mean,
if those two are connected. Like species being very old and species about to get extinct, they are not connected, I suppose.
well, not necessarily, maybe not old, but I feel that maybe the 2 square kilometer restriction seems kind of unnaturally small.
Huh. Yeah, it is the rarest bird in the whole world. Yeah.
That kind of rarity would only be found in an island or something. And well, I was just wondering why it would be so restricted. That's why.
Yeah. Probably read up on that bird. I mean, I only have like limited knowledge from whatever Umesh told us, and yeah, and my friends talk about. So I'm not sure exactly. Probably read more. So rarity of a species not measured by which of the factors? Um, all right. So let's see what the answer is. So rarity of the species is basically connected to only the number and the area. So IUCN collects I mean, at least it rates the species based on where it falls, based on the number of individuals of that species and the area that it covers. So A, B, and D would actually tell you the number and the area, but C doesn't tell you about anything. So habitat specialization, people must have understood what it is. Like there are like certain habitats within which these species are found, and not all habitats are suitable for that species. Geographic range and local abundance. So it might happen that the birds are limited to a particular area, but they are locally very abundant. I mean, something like a case of white-bellied sholakili or Nilgiri sholakili. They are very restricted to the mountain tops of Western Ghats, and they are found nowhere else. But locally, they are very abundant. So, yeah. So all these three come together to form how rare the species is and where it should fall uh, in the IUCN list. So this is the NGO that I was talking where Priyanka Hariharan did her work and where that study is from. The Valparai NGO uh, yeah, that works on the restoration of Valparai forests. So these three are like one of the major conservation organizations that are working in India, apart from WWF and Wildlife Trust of India. Yeah, apart from them, these are the ones that actually work. I mean, even National Geographic works, but they yeah. So apart from them, I mean, so all of them have different species that they work on, but most of them have like a multi species kind of an approach. Most of them have sites that they work in across the country. NCF is found in Andaman. They work in Andamans as well. They work in the Himalayas, and WCS works on No, the WCS also has work in central India. They particularly target large carnivores and herbivores. CWS works on elephants, and elephants are the main, yeah. But
So what is CWS?
Center for Wildlife Studies. So
Okay.
yeah, it is run by I think what's the name? Kriti Karant, Ullas Karant and Kriti Karant, and their major work is in Karnataka, where they have set up this alarm system for that helps in elephant human coexistence to reduce elephant human conflicts. So yeah, that's what they're known for. I'm not very sure of what other work they do. CWS, probably leopards as well, but I'm not sure. Uh, yeah, WCS. Yeah, I have one collaborator from there. Sure, let's see the answer. The answer is NCF Nature Conservation Fund. Is I think what's the full form of it? Is run by a lot of people. I think even Suhel is a part of NCF, and if I'm not wrong, but the Valparai NGO is the Valparai office is basically run by TR Shankar. Okay, T.R. Shankar Raman and Divya Mudappa. Divya Mudappa works on elephants. T.R. Shankar Raman works, I mean, he used to work on birds a lot. Now both of them are heavily invested in the restoration program in Valparai, where, yeah, so they have this field station where researchers go and carry out the study. And yeah, so yes, Govind.
Sir, do you do much conservation work?
We don't because like each each supervisor has a different school of thought. So some people believe that conservation is absolutely necessary, whereas some people believe that things have been changing on Earth forever. Like it's not the first time that, I mean, yeah, of course, the intensity of the change is very high, but it's not the first time that species have gone extinct and species have. Um, yeah, it's actually better to. I mean, some people believe in research more than conservation, because conservation is like also dealing with a lot of people, which most people are not made for. I mean, I do. I am definitely not made for something like social science or something of that sort. I can't deal with people, and yeah. So, but some people are made for conservation. So conservation is both basically research as well as social science, a bit of that. So yeah.
Conservation is the application of research, right, sir?
Yeah, but this also requires a lot of human intervention, and how do you take care of the humans that live with the wildlife, human animal conflict. A lot of these stuffs are very difficult to handle, especially particularly when there's a human aspect to it, like A3, eight, I don't know, ATREE. They work a lot on conservation, and yeah, citizen science is not basically social science as such. Citizen science is basically data that you get from general citizens. So a lot of science is done by particular one. I mean, particular researchers. Yes. So they're usually done by like one or two researchers who go into the forest, collect data, come out, and a lot of that is published in some paper somewhere, and nobody bothers about those researchers. It only comes out later on. But citizen science is basically that data that is basically collected by the citizen themselves. So yeah, but conservation is not. I mean, conservation may require citizen science, but it's not exactly like for example, like I said, CWS, they work with elephants, right? And they work with elephants, and they have come up with this alarm system and stuff like that. So there's a community is involved in mitigating the human animal conflict. So it's not just the forest department who have this job of stopping the elephants from not coming into the villages, and it's not like if something happens to the villagers or to the farmlands, the forest department would be the sole would hold the sole responsibility. That is not possible, especially when you're dealing with such large animals. So there has to be hand in hand involvement of both the community and the forest department and other scientists involved in that particular area. So that is what conservation is all about, which is not for everyone. Just stating it.
Sir, so you subscribe to the second school of thought that extinction is natural?
I don't subscribe. Yeah, probably. So I mean, it also comes from where what my background is. So my background is landscape architecture, and over there also there were like two school of thoughts. One is like you very human centric. You design for humans, you get out of it, and it remains only human particular way of. So you landscape architecture is basically designing everything from architecture to where the buildings are sitting, how the water is flowing, how the soil is conserved, everything. Yeah, so that's landscape architecture. But there are like also two school of thoughts for it. Like one college in Delhi only designs like a very human centric design. Then there's a college in Ahmedabad, where I come from, where they have a very holistic, sustainable kind of a point of view while designing a landscape architecture. They believe that everything should go hand in hand, which is like a school of thought that I also subscribe to afterwards. But what I was trying to say is uh, most of the design that we come up these days are made to last for like 100 years, 200 years, maximum 300 years. But like a lot of these designs are supposed to be to last like for a really long time, and that is only possible uh, if you don't need constant human intervention, like if it grows with the nature. So um, yeah, I mean conservation as such uh, would mean that it's either, yeah, I mean it's a very tricky topic, so let's not go into it. It's got a lot of, yeah. I'll change the question. Sorry about that whole monologue. So, Vedang, the citizen science can also be used for general research. Like a lot of our research are dependent on citizen science projects, especially the eBird. eBird is like one of the citizen science projects. So, yeah. Um,
Sir, in regards to extinction, people say that this is the sixth mass extinction, right, sir?
yeah.
So do you believe that as well?
Yeah, Anthropocene, yeah.
The Anthropocene extinction, right, sir?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Mass extinctions are quite common in Earth's history, though, right, sir?
Not quite common, like in the
Well,
history of
uh,
what, when was the first life, when did the first life evolve? Like 3.6 billion years ago? Like that's a
the
lot of time. Yeah. So
exact time isn't known, but around that time, sir.
so
It's
yeah,
mostly cyanobacteria.
yeah. So from then till now, there have been six extinctions. There have been other extinctions as well, but not as big as these six. Yeah.
Well, including the Anthropocene, there are six, sir.
Five.
The
Yeah, there
first,
have been five. Yeah. Yeah.
the first being the Ordovician extinction. It was due to I think it
Oxygen.
was due to immense climate change due to the increase in algae, I think. Then you had the Devonian extinction. Then you had the worst extinction called the Permian extinction, the Triassic extinction, and the Cretaceous dinosaur extinction.
Yeah.
I've heard that the Permian extinction was the worst. During that extinction event, about 82 to 95% of all life was wiped out.
Yeah. But mostly was um, they were all most of them were like marine animals, right?
Yes, sir. 90% of marine animals and 80% of land living animals.
Yeah.
During the Permian, the landscape was completely different. It was Pangea, so most of the rain and moisture was centered around the coasts, and the interior was very large desert and arid like structure.
Yeah, possible. They're very far away from uh, cloud forming. Yeah. See. Anyways, let's see what the answer is. I think everyone got the answer. Population decline of 80 to 90% over the previous 10 years or 3 generations, and fewer than 50 individuals. It comes under critically endangered. So, what population viability analysis does is it looks at the current population and looks at all the demographic variables like the birth, the growth, the death, the mortality, and what are the reasons for the mortality, and then comes up with a model that can actually predict how long the population can survive, and then also comes up with the reasons or some other factors where the longevity of the population can be increased. So basically the whole idea is it to be able to explain if the population that we're looking at is can be sustained for longer than uh, for a much longer time, like it can be sustained yeah, basically forever, without constant human intervention. Like you you guys have heard about ex situ and in situ conservation. Ex situ is where the animals are taken out from their natural habitat, and then with the human intervention they are yeah, they are bred and they are taken care of for a possible release back into the wild in the future. But in situ is basically trying to save the habitat, trying to control other factors that are responsible for the decline of the population, like hunting or poaching or something like that. So, but the animal remains in their natural habitat. So, yeah, PVA is basically where ex situ is definitely not required, and even in situ, the number of interventions by the humans go down and down. So, it's basically looking at how long can a population be viable without intervention. So based on this study, yeah, like the California condor and the grizzly bear was the first one that was done for population viability analysis in America, Yellowstone National Park.
The grizzly bear,
Yeah,
it was in situ conservation, right, sir?
it was in situ conservation. Oh, you're talking about the ex situ conservation. Oh, California condor, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then there are pygmy hawks in India as well, where the ex situ conservation is happening. No, I was talking about the PVA. Population viability analysis was done for the first time for grizzly bears in America. So, what might be the solution? Most people said A, some people said D. The answer is D. So A is basically PVA be used to evaluate relative rather than absolute extinction risk. Projections be made only over short time periods, and simple models be used rather than complicated ones. So, what do you mean by relative rather than absolute extinction risk in option A? Any guesses? What can it mean? Yes, Govind.
It means assessing the extinction risk compared to other species in the instead of absolute in and of itself, because that species might naturally have such risky traits instead of it being caused by anthropogenic factors.
Yeah, I was looking for some other answer, but yeah, this could also be right. Somebody else?
Maybe like looking at patterns and trends that show a decline rather than looking at something that actually specifically predicts extinction. I don't know.
Possibly. Vedang says like a species may be found to be extinct but may still be present in hiding. No. Okay, so when you say absolute extinction risk is basically looking at or saying like 50 years from now, 100 years from now, the animal would be extinct. Now, instead of doing that, could there be another way of saying something similar? How about doing it like based on the generation times, like 3 generations from now or 5 generations from now? So that would be an absolute, relative extinction rate. So, like that. Uh, like then, that's basically dependent. So that's basically dependent on the generations and not exact years because, yeah, I mean,
So, what do you mean, sir, by comparing each generation?
so in this generation there are like some 100 individuals. The next generation would be more like 200 individuals, and third generation there possibly should be more. But if something happens, and by fourth generation the capacity would be reached, so then the population should be stable, or it might. I mean, so rather than saying years, then it should be better to say generations. But that's just one part. You might have to read the whole paper to know what exactly it means. And projections be made only over short time periods because if people must have heard of butterfly effect, like that also applies everywhere. So all the projections made, yeah, for climate, projections made for stock market, projections made for even population viability analysis, can only be made for very short time periods and not for a long time period because anything happen in the long. I mean, there are like these. People must have heard of these stochastic events which can possibly derail all of your efforts and you won't be able to. Yeah, so nobody can predict those events. So it's better to make for short time periods and take precautions accordingly. Then that would require concurrent population. Yes, so population viability analysis can only be done for animals that are like thoroughly monitored. You can, yeah, and yeah, each individual is. Um, so it also involves like a thorough detailed analysis of the genetic composition of each animal, so that you would know like, um, yeah, is there a possibility of inbreeding, outbreeding, and stuff like that. So PVA is like very intense in that sense. Simple models be used rather than complicated one. What does this mean? Anyone?
It's similar to the previous option. Instead of accounting for rather complicated factors, we take in the easy to understand factors.
Is it the ease of understanding? I don't think it's the ease of understanding.
Well, not the ease of understanding, the more certain factors.
Okay, somewhere there. Anybody wants to explain a bit more of what Govind said? Can there be more? I mean, can it be more clarified? Anybody?
Sir, could I elaborate the best I can?
Yeah.
I meant factors that are clearly measured and defined and should be taken into account instead of factors which could be vague or incorrect in some way.
But I don't know. I mean, we can take a lot of factors like that, which are clearly defined, like temperature, precipitation, humidity, forest cover, land use. A lot of these factors are now clearly defined. I mean, you don't have to be vague or use a proxy for these things. So yeah, I'm not sure if clearly defined and not vague variables would mean, uh, yeah, would mean that they make simple models. Anybody? People who have done some kind of modeling. I mean, not modeling as with variables and stuff like that. Okay, so when people do analysis and stuff like that, they try and see what are the variables responsible for the change in whatever is on the y-axis, the number of animals, the abundance, the density of animals, the presence and absence of the animals. So they are looking at which variable can be responsible, and often it's not one variable or two variables. Often it's like three or four variables or five variables that come together, and I mean, that could be one of the reasons, or there could be like some interactions that happen between the variables. Like there could be an interaction between temperature and humidity, or something of that sort. Probably you should read up on interactions of variables. So the simple model would be actually a model which does not use a lot of variables. That is what the simple model would mean. A complicated one would use a lot of variables to try and So the thing with using a lot of variables is somehow, somewhere, a model would be formed that explains exactly how the numbers, the pattern is shown of the number of animals or something like that. But the problem with using complicated ones is like this could be like a chance, and it need not be a very good model. It's just fitting well with the data that we have, or that data that the people have. It might not exactly be true in in real life. So if someone uses simple models, and it probably won't be able to uh, tell you exactly how the trend of the animal population is happening like 100%, but I don't know, 60% or 70% or 50% is good enough with the simple models, and that would be able to tell you, because one has used only a few variables, that would be able to tell you more robust predictions than the complicated ones. um, yeah.
It refers to greater focus on a few important variables.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fewer variables, rather than, yeah. And yeah, people also use these interaction terms and all. Sometimes you tend to use a lot of interaction terms, which is also making the models more complicated. Anyways, so yeah, so the people understood what models are. It's basically an abstract of what is happening in the real life. The people are trying to figure out what are the variables that are responsible for the change in trend, or the trend of change that they are seeing in the animal number, population density, or something of that sort. And they're trying to come up with, okay, they come up with like a formula or something that can tell you like, oh, in the future, if this trend continues, then in the future, in within like 50 years or 3 generations or 5 generations, this would be the number of animals based on how the climate is changing, how the land cover is reducing, or how, yeah, or if the government is coming up with any kind of measure to control land cover change or something of that sort in the like next 5 years. So people also come up with like climate change models, like they usually we have RCP 2, RCP 4, RCP 8. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's basically if the current trend of climate, or whatever, current trend of how the world is responding to climate change, which is basically doing mostly nothing. So if that continues, then that is RCP 8, and that's like the worst. So that's 50 years, some 4-degree increase in temperature, something like that. Then there's RCP 4, where there's that the world is actually taking some measures but not enough measures. Then there's RCP 2, where the world is immediately taking some measures and it's going down. Yeah. So those are like all models based on a lot of other variables. So that's like a gist of what models are. Anyways.
So there's a similar crisis in Africa that's happening, right, sir?
I'm not sure. I've only
Well,
heard.
I watched this documentary once. It
Hmm.
explained that Africa has a similar incident. Like there is this month incident whereby after poaching, poachers would poison the bodies of, say, an elephant or rhino or whatever that was poached, and this poisoned body would kill a lot of vultures. Like this one poaching incident killed like hundreds of vultures actually.
Okay. Yeah.
So apparently, there's a similar bad situation in Africa.
Yeah. everybody thinks it's both. Wow. Okay, you guys could be right. This was an old question that I took from my older questions. But say, for example, if the vulture population is drastically reduced, and the government hasn't done anything to ban the medicine, would that be safe to do in situ conservation in that sense?
No, sir.
I'm just asking. I'm not sure. Huh? This was just a very vague opinion kind of a question.
So
Uh,
So
in
what?
in
Sorry.
2006, after the Asian vulture crisis was officially found, the Indian government did ban diclofenac, uh, and there were also in situ conservations, right, sir? Like there were several areas where meat was thrown out for vultures, like vulture dinner sites, I think. And of course, you also had captive breeding programs which were set up. I've heard of both.
yeah, yeah. Rosebeh, you were saying something.
Yeah, no. So I was just wondering. I mean, when you say in situ, in this case, in the case of vultures, what would those, I mean, lines of conservation be
Yeah,
like?
like Govind was saying, throwing meat, having I don't know some. It's called vulture cafes or something. I forgot what they were. I mean, but apart,
Canteens or something. Yeah.
yeah.
So I mean, I thought that something like that maybe could be possible.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, captive breeding or something in such a situation would be the first step, I guess.
Yeah.
At least in the case of vultures, which could be bred.
Okay. How Vedant?
Isn't captive breeding and in situ conservation limited or left to the very critically endangered species? Like it's like something like the ICU thing for species when they're about to get extinct.
Yeah, so that's what I was asking. So anyway, the bird had reduced like 90%. Like we already did see that number. Like if the numbers have reduced by 90% in the past 10 years, which happened with vultures, they would come in critically endangered. This thing.
Mm.
And I was just asking if more like an opinion question that if government never took the this policy of banning diclofenac nationwide, would it be wise to do in situ conservation at that in that like at that situation?
Then it wouldn't be,
You know?
according to me.
Yeah, it
It
would.
wouldn't be in that case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more like an ex situ. Yes, Govind, you were saying something.
Yes, sir. I was saying that while ex situ conservation is like it's like an immediate ICU sort of situation, as it was mentioned, like a last resort. It kind of needs in situ conservation, right, sir? Even if the captive breeding program is successful,
Hmm.
it in order to actually release the vultures back into the wild, you need to do in situ conservation as well.
Yeah, I mean that's why. I mean, yeah, this conversation can go on forever. I'm just more curious about, or I just wanted to point out that these policies, government policies, are like equally important when it comes to conservation of animals, and you can't. I mean, you cannot just I mean, sit straight one day and say, okay, oh no, I'm going to do ex situ conservation, because that wouldn't be enough, because unless until the policies change, even with the ex situ conservation, like one day to the bird has to be released, and that when would that day come? So something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, all of you are right. It was just an opinion question. So yeah.
In this case, it was favorable, right? So the government did help ban diclofenac.
Yeah, it did. But then there are new medicines that have come up in the market which are very similar to what diclofenac is, and yeah,
I did hear that some new versions are not as harmful as the original
diclofenac,
diclofenac.
yeah, but they are still harmful. Let's see. So Manmat says still the solution has not come to conserve. I think the conservation is needed even in situ. Okay. Yeah, possibly. on long term if the species continues to have external factors affecting its survival. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Unless there's a change in the policy and something has to be done, especially for something, I mean, for an animal that doesn't move that far away, and is really limited to a very small area like a Bougainvillea chichla, for example, in situ conservation will work very nicely because you know that the external factors can be easily treated and controlled and stuff like that. But for something like vultures, which have a really large home range, and their food is basically a very human. I mean, uh, yeah, it's a very human. In like the food is basically has a lot of human intervention. So unless until policies come in place, it's very difficult for some species like that to be um, to to be conserved in an in situ manner and not ex situ manner. That is my opinion, but yeah.
Vultures also breed very slowly, right, sir?
Yes, they have very slow breeding. Yeah, Vedant, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry for this question. It's a little late. I suppose you've already gone to the ninth one. I wanted to ask: once the ex situ conservation is done, what happens with the artificially bred individuals? Are they let out in the environment, or are they kept in captive?
It depends. It depends on what I've seen and what I've heard of pygmy hawks and vultures in Buxa tiger reserve. They are released in the wild, but it involves, and also like a lot of other storks and crane that have been bred in outside. So there's a lot of factors that get involved. So uh, um, the birds never know that their caretakers were human. So it's basically fed with a hand that looks like the stork neck or something like that. So those kinds of interventions are always like, even there's like this monitored, the vulture movement is monitored throughout in the cage, and they are fed automatically. No human intervention is done unless until it's drastically important. So after that it becomes easier for the animal to be released in the wild, because they're not they don't get imprinted on the human beings that raised them, like they do for pandas, for example. Like a lot of humans are involved in their breeding, but that's a totally different case. I don't think pandas would ever be released in the wild, or even if they have, but it's a very small area that they have been released in. But for example, something like a migratory bird or something, it's very there's a story where I mean, it's an anecdote. I'm not. It's definitely true, but I don't know the exact details of it. Where the bird was imprinted on the human being, and they have they have this instinct of getting imprinted of whatever raises them, and they follow that human being. And because it's a migratory bird, the bird had to move from this area to the other, wherever, whatever the breeding areas or something. So
Okay.
to push that animal to do that, the person, the caretaker, had to sit on a airplane and fly to that area. So the birds
That's
followed,
fine.
yeah, followed
Okay.
that, yeah.
Okay.
So those things happen. I mean, people have tried a lot of stuff. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, go
That
ahead.
was great. Thanks. Thanks for the information.
Sir, I think I've actually heard of the incident you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it was about geese.
yeah. I think not a stock, so probably a geese. Yeah, yeah. Geese are very strong when it comes to imprinting to the parent. Yeah.
I think the person in question also wrote a book.
Possibly it was like a long time back. So we did discuss about this question where we talked about the interior species and the edge species. Fragmentation, something like forest patch. Oh, people did say, huh, forest patch, linear intrusion, like the roads and railways, and other like fragmentation can also be caused by agriculture. All of them basically reduces the area, or rather fragments the larger patches into smaller patches, And the problem with smaller patches is that they also have the edge, the area within the edge of these patches would also increase as compared to the area within the interior, the core of the patches. So therefore what happens is the core area and the edge area somewhat become equal in number. So there's a decrease in the core area species, which is the interior species, and there is automatically an increase in the edge area species, which is, yeah. So I think we discussed that last week or something.
I think it was week 10, sir.
So sorry.
I think it was last week, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't didn't know the answer then. Anyways, yeah. Vedang asks, sorry to ask, but what is fragment isolation? Is there a term like that? So, from the term, what I can imagine its meaning is basically if a forest gets fragmented and the linear intrusion is so wide that the distances between the fragments keep increasing, and there are a few fragments that become so far away from the main the main patch that they become isolated for a lot of things, like a dispersal of the animals in that fragment to the main. So yeah, so oh, they're the same. Remain in loose weight, gain weight. No, they are not the same. C and D are the same. Oh, sorry, C and D are the same. Then pick from ABC. Sorry. Yeah, so that would mean that the animals in the isolated patch, the dispersal distances, unless until they have like large dispersal distances, they won't be able to go to the other patches, and thus the populations get isolated, and yeah, probably that's what the fragment isolation would mean. Okay, let's see what the answer is. So the answer is insectivorous species that remained in fragments gained weight after isolation, fragment isolation. Oh, you come from this. Okay. While frugivorous birds maintained a stable weight. Okay. So fragment isolation is basically after defragmentation, whatever is left. Why we'll get to know from the next question. Uh-oh. Did I miss something? Yeah. So this is what the graph looked like, where the weights of the insectivorous birds increased. So there was another list of birds over here. So weights are usually on an increase, but let's see what. This is the next question. A lot of people said B. Oh, okay. So the answer is A actually. What did people say? There was only one person who said A, two people who said A. No, one. A lot of people said B. So basically, what happened was obviously because of these fragment isolation, there is a lot of. So what happens is a lot of these insectivorous birds do get affected because of fragment isolation. So most species are so in this study what happened was they looked at birds caught 5 years later. I mean they looked at the weight of the birds in the beginning of the study, and after 5 years they looked at the bird, but not all birds could be caught again. I think there was a very small percentage of birds that were caught again, and then they looked at the weight of these birds. So what happened was most of the species or most of the individuals of the species, they had already left the patch and moved on to the next patch, the other patches which were larger in size or something. And what that did was a lot of these niches were open. So suppose the bird uh, yeah, I mean, most of the generalist birds were left behind, and they could basically feed on a lot more species, not lot more niches in that particular fragment, and that's why they for them for those birds their weight increased, but yeah, the number of species reduced. So that's what the answer. Yes, Govind.
Sir, I'm sorry I couldn't hear it properly during that time. I had internet issues. Could you please repeat the reason?
So, do read up this paper. What they're saying is when after 5 years, what happened was they had ringed and they had tagged a lot of birds in the initial period of the study, and once they came back after 5 years, they realized that they could not find a lot of these tagged birds. Most of them are not present in that fragment anymore, and the ones that they could find, they found that those were heavier birds, and especially insectivorous birds, they were heavier birds. Why is that? Because there were many species initially, and many of these species moved on to the next larger patch or something, and there were some generalist species that were left behind, and they could eat from a lot of other niches that were left empty because of the birds that left. So they could eat more, and thus they become heavier. That's the reason that these people give. This that's not been proved. That's just one speculation that they say. Um, yeah, it could be B or C also, but the stronger speculation, according to the researchers, is A. I hope you get it.
Yeah, well, A and B seem rather similar, sir.
No, so B is basically most individuals of the insectivorous birds died. Yeah, here, yeah, they didn't move to the next. I mean, yeah, call. Yeah, B could also mean that the same generalist species, most individuals died, or yeah, I mean, yes, with that.
In this case, fragmentation would mean what exactly? I mean, it could be a loss of a part of a forest or some artificial human encroachment or something like what it could be.
Effect of forest fragment. Oh, this is BDFFP. Okay, this is quite a famous experiment that is going on in Amazon. Biological dynamics of forest fragment project. So a lot of like a large part of forest area are being converted to some other land cover or land use. So that is what is usually happening. So scientists thought that anyways the government is converting a large part of these forest areas into other land use. So why not conduct a study doing this before and after kind of a study in these these forest fragmentation and
Okay.
get to know more about what effects are there possible for. So this has been going on
So
for
in this
like
case,
20.
I feel if there has been an intervention which has led to the fragmentation of a forest patch,
Yeah,
I suppose there would be loss of the natural vegetation.
that's
And
true. Yeah,
in this case, it would mainly be I suppose it's the evergreen forest, right?
yeah, in
Amazonia.
Amazon, yes.
Yeah. So those are some of the tertiary levels of this plants. I mean, the what do you call it? Something which has evolved over a large number of years, maybe millions of years.
Yeah,
And there will be bird species that would have adapted to it, right?
yeah.
Like in this case, we've taken into account insectivores and
Frugivores,
yeah,
yeah.
insectivores, right? And frugivores, right? The
Yeah,
second one.
yeah,
Yeah. So frugivores would have probably been more adapted to such land area with more larger trees and all that. So if they are lost, usually by the process of natural succession, isn't it that the insects usually start to colonize more in an area which has lost its forest and has more of a grass area? Because once you take off the forest, usually what succeeds is the lower forms of plant life on which the insect population thrives.
but insect
So
thrives
wouldn't it
everywhere, right?
be? Pardon me.
Insects can thrive in the forest as well. In fact, there are more insects in the
Yes,
forest.
certainly they can. Certainly they can. But if you look at the ratio between the amount of fruit reserve that would be available to the insect reserve, I suppose then the insect biomass would be more, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So wouldn't that be also a factor that could be influencing this?
Like I said, this was not tested. The reason was not tested. They just had a speculation, and I would go with their speculation rather than us speculating. But yeah, I mean, your speculation could be totally true. Who knows? But since those people have studied in that area, I would rather not go
Yes.
on. Yeah, that's the only reason. Otherwise, I don't have. I mean, I don't have a problem with your speculation. It could be very
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yes, Govin.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It was mentioned that frugivorous birds tend to prefer larger trees
Yeah.
and are also they're larger bodied, right, sir?
Yeah.
So they can move through the canopies and they can also transfer to other
Patches.
patches and travel between patches a lot easier than insectivorous birds.
Yeah.
So is that why their weight is much more stable?
But also remember that they are not they are understory birds. So they are understory frugivores bird, like Palani laughing thrush or something like a red whiskered bulbul or something like that. So yeah. So I'm not sure why the frugivores remain stable. Probably you'll have to read the paper more. Also, do read up on this biological dynamics of forest fragment project that is going on. It's going on for like some 30-40 years by now. The last I remember when I read about it, it was like 20 years old already, so I can't remember when that was. So
I think the previous week it was mentioned that frugivorous birds are larger bodied and travel more.
yeah, but not all frugivores are larger bodied and
Well,
travel.
in general, that is.
Yeah, yeah. Probably do look at the project and see what frugivore birds they're talking about.
Sir, could you name some birds in the Scandinavian mountains? I can't think of many birds that live in such cold habitats.
No, I can't. But I think Scandinavian birds, most of them would be finches. They have a lot of robins. They have a lot of finches, robins, nightingales,
Do you have tits there too?
tits. Yeah, these Scandinavian mountains, I mean, these birds are mostly the ones that we read about in all these the stories, the fairy tales, the Grimm brothers tales that come. So all these birds are the ones that are from these. I mean, whatever you read in the literature, especially from that area, are the birds. So nightingale, tits, robins, yeah. Sorry, did you guys give answers? Okay. I didn't particularly give the name of the study because the study was basically exactly telling the answer. So I've removed the name of the study. So anyway, the answer is they do move uphill faster. Um, so, so let's go to the next question. It's actually a continuation to the first question. Slow species would mean slow in that slow turnover of generation. So species with a slow turnover of generation, that would mean that they have a larger lifespan and they take more time to produce more offspring. So like K selected species would be called slow species. More K selected than R.
Sir,
Yeah.
our selected species are more have a better chance of surviving climate change and global warming than K selected species, right, sir?
It all depends, huh? But there would be one more question in somewhere after this, but it all depends. These are all like theories and hypotheses, and nobody can. But yeah, our species are generally also generalist species, so they would definitely be much more capable of surviving climate change because they live in like vast differences in their habitats. But yeah, let's see what the next question comes up with. Anyways, the answer to this is all of the above. So the long-lived species cannot respond fast to changing circumstances. Yeah, they take some time, and species with a slow turnover of generation can be more vulnerable to climate change. Yeah, because their responses to the climate change is slow, and their generation time is more. Their number of offspring, so are selected the good thing, or actually the benefit of the R selected is like if the weather changes, then they can immediately come back. I mean, or they can immediately retain their numbers within a few months or few years or something. But for our selected to do that would take a lot of time to come back to the original number. Slow species also occur at low densities and require large areas, so that's also a big problem. Somebody raised their hands. Yes, Govind.
And all our selected species are also quicker to adapt, right, sir? Because the newer
It's not quicker
generation
to
can.
adapt. It's basically they have a lot of habitats that they use, so they are generalists in that sense. So they can survive a lot of different kinds of weather conditions or habitats. So that is one. And quicker to adapt is what means that they have shorter generation time, so it's easier for them to to produce phenotypes that are able to adapt to a change in environment. So yeah, probably you can say that quicker to adapt in that sense. Yeah, but you understand that we are not talking about the one single generation adapting immediately. That's not how it is. It's basically takes a lot of generations for it to come to that
Ah,
adaptation. Yeah.
I know, sir. I know, sir. That's why, because our selected species have a higher generation turnover. That's why they are quicker to adapt.
Yeah. Anyways, oh, this is quite a complicated map, but yeah, go through it and see if. I mean, some of this I can't even explain, but I think it would be better if you take this paper and go through it. It's a nature paper, so definitely something worthwhile. People have already given up. I'll try to explain the graph as much as possible, but I also needed some time to go through the paper. I couldn't exactly, but yeah. So what they're doing is, okay, I'll explain. So what they're doing is, they are talking about, of course, everyone talks about climate change and the rain shifts happening poleward and towards the top of the mountains. But what happens is that nobody's talking about how it may vary when we're talking about where the climate niche is. So basically, species that are already near the pole would have a different response than species that are slightly away from the pole. So that is what they're talking about over here. They looked at I'm not sure where it is. Scandinavian country only, I suppose. So the species on this is the North Boreal, which is already closer to the pole. Middle Boreal, little bit away from the pole, and South Boreal a little further away from the pole. Although all of them very high latitudes. So they looked at different kinds of taxa like birds, mammals, insects, and even microbes. They looked at all kinds of taxa to see whether they see different kind of responses and different NB, MB, and SB, South Boreal, Middle Boreal, and North Boreal. And these bar plots are basically showing the proportion of species so this column is for temperature, this column is for rainfall, and this column is for snow covered days. And they looked at how the number of species vary based on temperature, rainfall, and snow covered days, how they are changing in the last 40 years or something. 4 decades, 40 years. And this entire distance is 1200 kilometers. So they looked at what bar plot show the proportion of species. So basically, if this line is 0 and this line is 1, then bar plot is basically showing, this particular bar plot is showing just over 50%. This is showing exactly 50% of all the species, and each of these yellow, green and red is showing like this is what the yellow, green and red is. So yellow shows that there's the probability of presence is on the y-axis, and climate variable, whichever variable that we're talking about, temperature, rainfall and snow covered days, probability of presence. So if it's increasing, then it's yellow. If it's stable and there's no change, then that's green, and if it's decreasing, then that's red. So if there is more red, that means the number that taxa has a reducing number of individuals. If there is more yellow, then there's an increasing number in that for that taxa. And 1, 2, 3, 4 is basically the decade that they're talking about, the 4 decades that they're talking about. So this is the first decade, second, third, fourth decade. And what you can see is what I've asked is, where do you think the response to climate change was strongest? Was it in the northern boreal, in the middle boreal, and or in the southern boreal? Can responses here means change in population or better adaptation? Yes, Govind.
Sir, this paper describes the level of effect of climate change depending upon the latitude.
Yeah. Response here means change in population. Yes, change in population. Yes. Or better, no, not better. I mean, it could mean better adaptation also, but change in population because of that adaptation. Adaptation is not exactly measured over here. What is measured is the abundance or the change in the number of species, the number of individuals of a species. So, any answers? Nobody? Yeah, you're totally right. But I mean, confusing it with adaptation is basically, I mean, it's a meta-analysis. So what is, so I'll just write it down. Meta-analysis. The meta double A. So basically, what meta-analysis does is it takes a lot of studies, already done studies, and then somehow standardize them so that they can be compared. And so it has multiple studies. So standardize them so that they can be compared, and then is like something some kind of a generalization can be made about like the question that they're asking for a lot of taxa or a lot of area, like a lot of geographical coverage or something like that. So so it's very difficult. I mean, meta-analysis for adaptability may have been done, but it's very difficult to measure adaptation as such on field. It's rather easier to measure numbers of individuals of a species. So most of these studies are basically the studies were measuring the density or the population or the occupancy of these animals. So yeah, even if the adaptation was better or worse, we'll just be able to say something about the number of the individuals of the species and nothing about the adaptation. Yeah.
Sir, I didn't quite get what meta-analysis was.
So basically, some bird person did some study on birds and how climate change has increased or reduced the bird species. So he has done at the level of the community or something like that. Then there could be insect or butterfly guy or butterfly researcher who does some more study on butterflies. then there could be another guy who does studies on mammals. So meta-analysis could actually, the person who's doing a meta-analysis would actually take all these studies together, standardize these studies in the sense that they can be comparable. Suppose one has used density as the y-axis, the other one has used the number occupancy as the y-axis, then there has to be some standardization so they can be compared. So they'll just be converted into one unit or something like that. And yeah, so that standardization happens, and then he comes up with these trends together. So it's a big thing, and they can also be done these fancy there can be these fancy analysis can be done from all the data together, and a new analysis is done to come up with more results in that sense. So that is basically what meta-analysis means. It could also mean that somebody has taken a study from Americas, India, Southeast Asia, China, and all these, and combined them together to give like a global picture of what is happening of birds happening to birds due to climate change. So that could be a meta-analysis in itself. Not one particular person has been on the field, or they could just add their own data and then do a meta-analysis in that sense. Yeah. So let me just show you the answer. The answer is basically North Boreal. Oh. Yeah, the answer is A. The maximum change that was seen, or maximum response to climate change, was strongest in A. As you can see, the maximum, the percentage of the species that were responding to climate change were not very high in the first and in the SB and the MB. Even when you can see a lot of greens were there and yellows and reds were less. But in A, greens were high as well, but yellows and red were also high. So a lot of response was shown in northern boreal, which is also true. That is where the places that are closer to poles also face a lot of a higher effect of climate change. There are more graphs to it. Probably you can look at the paper and see the very interesting graphs, which actually divided this particular study, the temperature, based on taxa. So they have divided that into bird taxa. How was the effect on the bird? How was the effect on the mammals? How was the effect on the insects? Probably you should look it up. And yeah. All right, so they are looking at, they have accounted for phylogeny and interspecific variation, and they confirm that climate warming uh, is generally correlated with body sizes, definitely, but the effects of the climate change is weaker in species. If you guys had read the reference, probably you would have understood that the answer is C and not A, like most of you would have said. Dampened in big brain birds. So the answer is actually C. Yes, Govind.
Sir, I chose C because I felt that larger brain birds would tend to be smaller.
Huh? What? Elephants have large brains. They are not small animals.
But in terms of birds,
Birds also. Corvids are large brains. They are not small. There is a general trend where it shows that the size of the animal and the brain size are relatively correlated, but that's not, that exactly doesn't stand true for all this thing. But
I meant proportionately speaking, sir.
and not very true. Let's see what the answer, what the reasons can be.
Well, the reason I felt that the smaller bodied birds might have proportionately larger brains is because, well, in mammals, anyway, tree shrews, for example, have the biggest brains compared to body size ratio in the animal kingdom, sir.
Yeah, but you sure about that?
Well, in tree shrews, yeah. I think it's the pen-tailed tree shrew.
That's like one species. Is there a I mean, is there a trend shown by a lot of? No, it's not the trend. No, no, it's not a trend. Trend is actually doesn't go like that. It doesn't matter what the body size of the animal is. The brain size can vary a lot. Like for example, ostriches have a very small brain. In fact, it's as big as the eyes of the bird. Crocodiles have a very small brain, all again as big as the eyes of the animal.
Crocodiles are actually quite smart, though, sir.
No, but they have very small brains.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah. So yeah. Whereas corvids, the crows and the magpies, they are not very big birds, but they have bigger brains, and one can see from the proportionate size of their head relative to the body. Most birds have smaller heads and relatively smaller heads, but corvids and magpies have bigger heads related to the body size. Um, Elephants have bigger brains, like actual bigger brains, and yeah, and apart from how dolphins have bigger brains, and that can again be seen from how the dolphin heads are larger as compared to, yeah. Anyways, the answer to this question is basically greater behavioral flexibility, which comes with larger brains. Uh, Animals can think, animals can change their behavior. They are not rigid when it comes to behavioral attributes that they have learned instinctively. Yes, Govind.
Sir, I'm not sure if this is true, but is it possible that the reason that some intelligent or larger brained animals tend to be more generalist?
Yes, that is true. I mean, that's true for crows. That's true for human beings. Yeah, they're not specialists. Yes, that can be a trend. That can be true. Probably there are studies also that are proving it, but you might have to look it up to be exactly sure.
Crows are considered the smartest birds, right, sir?
Yeah, but even macaws are considered smart. So they also have like a relatively larger head as compared to other birds. I mean the parrot family, whatever it's called, Psittacidae. Yeah.
Sir, the reason for the crow's ubiquitous status is because of its intelligence.
Possibly behavioral flexibility. That could be one of the reasons. So basically, the gist of the study is basically the smarter birds or the large brain birds may be able to survive climate warming, whereas birds that have very small brains may not. Although smaller birds can survive climate change, but even amongst them, the ones with smaller brains probably won't, because they are behaviorally very rigid than their cousins who have larger brains. So yeah. Can Harini tell why she chose D? Harini, why did you choose D? She was like, I give up. I don't want to answer anymore. Harini, you there? Is she there? She's not there. No, she's there. Because I didn't know, yes. Okay. All right. So that brings us to the end of this session. Oh, there is.
Actually, very sorry. I'd like to change my answer. I thought, behavioral response is also a response, right? So, how is that weaker in larger brain animals? I'm not sure. I don't know if I
Possibly.
understood the
Sorry.
question.
Say that again, Harini. I didn't quite catch your question.
Yeah. So the response of species with larger brains is significantly weaker, according to the study, right? But then behavioral responses are also significant responses, right?
No, the question says
So,
that although climate warming is generally correlated with body size reduction in North American migrants,
okay.
these responses are significantly weaker in species
These
with.
responses, fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I did not relate those two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. With larger relatives. So yeah. So responses of the study basically. So responses in the sense X and Y. So Y wasn't responding with X. So like that kind of response, not the species response in that sense.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how smart the last question is, because I made that in like 1 second or something. But yeah, see if you can answer this. It's a simple answer. Somebody's joining now. So according to this paper, most of you have answered correct. I'll just run through it. So the answer is number decreases. Oh, okay. So there's no. So basically, according to this paper, if you want, you can look it up, assessing short and long-term variations. So effects on seed dispersers because of climate change would be that their numbers decrease, and that is probably because of land cover changes and climate change affecting the fruit bearing trees as well, probably reducing the number of fruits produced and stuff like that. So this paper explains that a lot. So probably you can take a screenshot and Google up this paper. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this session. And shall we close the session, or do you have any question? Yes, Manmat. Don't ask questions about exams and all.
No, sir. I have a doubt about double jeopardy.
Double Jeopardy.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I haven't read about. Okay, what was the what was the lecture about? Sorry.
Conservation.
Yeah. What did you understand in that?
Actually, there is a question.
Huh.
They have put that in conservation biology, the term double jeopardy refers to what? And they have options like rare species also being small body, and rare species also having poor dispersal ability,
Huh.
and rare species are, those are four options are there. Should I type this, or I'll tell you?
Yeah. If you can copy that question, probably. I haven't exactly gone through all the. Huh. Govind.
I know the question, sir. I can answer it if possible.
Can you repeat the question as well before you answer?
Sir, I was meant that what does that double jeopardy mean in conservation biology?
Okay.
That was the question.
Huh.
Oh, I can answer it if possible, sir.
Yeah.
Well, in double jeopardy, refers to a fact that species which are a very low number also tend to be very geographically restricted. A low population tends to be stuck to only one place.
Okay.
Like the example of the bird you gave. What's the name of that bird again? The one in Arunachal Pradesh.
Bugun Leochichla.
Yeah, that specific bird has a very low number, and it's also restricted to just less than 2 square kilometers.
Yeah.
That's double jeopardy. Both low population and low
Geographic
and
area.
limited distribution.
Okay. Is that answer enough, Manmat?
Yes, it is. I got it.
So basically, we had done that in the fourth question or something, where people were talking about rarity, right? Rarity had three options, right?
Yes.
So if all the three options are bad, then that becomes like triple jeopardy. But yeah, double jeopardy is for that. So geographic area and the number of individuals of the species are also there. Anyways, all right. I'll end the session. Bye. I'll see you next week. That would be the last session. All right.
Sir.
Yes, Govind.
Sir, you in the is this course meant for only ornithologists or
Yes.
bird watchers?
Yeah. Why?
You in the beginning you asked if I had done this sort of thing before.
No, nothing like that. No, I didn't ask for that. I mean, we are expecting a lot of diverse kind of a student. I mean, but diverse kind of a whatever audience. But yeah, I just asked it to like I didn't have any.
I'm sure, sir.
Yes, Veda.
This is not regarding the topic that we discussed today. I just wanted to ask if there's a similar course under BNHS, right? For ornithologists.
Yeah.
So is it by any chance any different from the course that is being offered here?
Okay.
Do you have any idea about it? Because a lot of the proprietors of this course are working on that as well.
So it would be very similar. In fact, this is quite an advanced course.
Can I?
Yeah, it was. Would you know
so,
better?
Vedang, I am not aware of how the courses run now, but maybe I'd done it maybe around 5 years back, and it was completely different. And very frankly, I wouldn't do that because it didn't have what I was looking for. That was more of a very, very basic level citizen scientist participation kind of thing. So, teaching you to read up more and interact on social media about conservation issues and things like that. We did have these lectures on very many similar topics that we have now, but in nowhere in the depth that we are doing now. So,
Okay.
so if you're
No,
That's good
if
to know
you're
because I
really
was in fact
interested
thinking
in,
of subscribing to it in addition to this,
I
but
don't know
I
if
found this
that's
course
changed
very.
now.
Pardon
But
me?
I don't know if that's changed now.
Okay.
But in this course, I got what I was looking for, and I
Definitely.
didn't
Me too.
get
Me
that in
too.
the PHS course.
Yes. Thanks a lot.
what
Thanks a lot.
course? What course is this, please? I haven't heard of it.
BNHS.
BNHS.
Ornithology course is BNHS. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do they
basic
offer-
ornithology or something like that. Okay.
Do they offer other courses as well?
They do.
Yeah. They have some other courses.
Check on their website or something.
Yeah.
You want to continue this discussion? I'll leave the call. Shall I have a meeting? Sure.
Yeah. Sure.
I'll just leave the call. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.